Hello everybody, Lisa from Supportive Tarot here. Before I jump into the topic of today's video, I just want to give you a little warning that I have slightly changed my video setup. So my camera is up a little higher. Sorry, I'm not going to stick my hand in your face, that's so rude. My camera is up a little higher and my computer laptop with my little preview window is down a little lower. And I have historically had my camera just right barely above the preview window because I obsessively stare at myself while I'm making videos. I know. The things we admit on YouTube. Anyway, so it's going to be a bit of like an adjustment for me to get used to raising my gaze, but I really wanted to get more comfortable looking right at the camera. And I also wanted to have my webcam positioned kind of back onto its tripod normally, because that's where I put it when I'm doing client readings. So I thought it'd make it easier for me to set up and do videos. So we'll see how it goes. But if you notice me staring down, I'm not reading anything and I'm not distracted by things other than myself. I'm distracted by myself. But really, is this new? No, probably not. So you probably are all used to it by now. Anyways, welcome back to Tarot de Marseille on Earth. This is our study video, or study series, where we are learning how to read numerologically or with a more earthy approach based on this book, Tarot on Earth by Tom Benjamin. So, last week, our goal was to read the first the introduction, and then the first chapter, the first lesson, which takes us through page 36, and then to do activity 1.1, or a portion of it. So I'll get to that in a second, but I just wanted to share a couple of bits that stood out to me from this experience so far, because that's what we're here for, is me sharing my experience so far. And I hope you guys have enjoyed your experience so far if you're following along. Firstly, if you haven't been watching Tom Benjamin's YouTube channel, please make sure that you do, because his voice is wonderful. And I am currently reading this book with his voice in my head, and it's quite nice. So if you don't watch his channel, you really, really should, because he has a nice voice. And then when you read it in his voice, it's even nicer. So anyway, there was a couple things that I found really charming about even the introduction. For starters, the introduction is lovely. A lot of times this is a section that I skip, but he kept it light. He kept it breezy, but he also had some good stuff in here. And most notably, near to the end, he makes a comment about how he really wants you to mess up this book, and I love that, because I am trying really hard to, the books that I choose to keep in my collection, which is not a lot, actually, I try not to accumulate a ton of books, because I accumulate a ton of decks, and I feel like I can have one, but maybe not the other, because this is Vancouver, real estate is bad, places are small, I just don't have that much storage space. So if I'm going to have a book, if I'm going to get a book, like in paper like this, I want to be able to, you know, not treat it so preciously most of the time. So when he made this comment about wrecking the book, I specifically got out a pen right that second and wrote, "Wreck it," right there, just to kind of break that initial hesitation to marking it up, because I really want to be free with just marking it up, writing in the margins, highlighting it, doing whatever I want to do throughout this whole process. So I started doing that right away. And then there is a note he has in here where he really does explain. I was a little concerned about this actually after my last video, whether you could use any pip deck or if it should be really a Marseille style. And I still don't know for sure if that's going to matter more when we get into courts or when we get into the majors. But in the minors, he specifically says that basically what he's looking for you to have here is not scenic minors. The way he explains that is he says that essentially what he calls them situational illustrations. That's the term he uses. Meaning, if you can look at the minor and there's some sort of illustration that gives you an idea of a specific scenario, that's what we want to get away from when we're working with this particular style of reading. We want to look at something a little more generic and more number-based. So if you have a deck that just has not very illustrated, scenic sort of pips, you're probably going to be just fine, at least through the pips for sure. So that was pretty nice to see, because I was pretty sure that was going to be the case, but it was good to have it confirmed. And then he makes a note here in tarot history, a little reminder to us all that tarot started out as a game for play. And the section that he put, that I marked here, is that he said, from what he could tell, the cards had no metaphysical or esoteric aim beyond the spiritual joy of play. And I made a note because I recently was looking for a way to engage with my tarot decks that was less heady and cerebral and more playful. So I had specifically looked online to see if I could find a tarot-based solitaire game to play. And I did stumble on one. You can look it up, called Queens of Fate. I hope I have that name right. I will try to find the video that shows, there's a video somebody made of how it sort of works. Not the maker of the rules of the game, but somebody else who put a video together. I'll try to find that and link it down in below in the description box, and that way you can check it out. But it was a really fun thing for me to do when I wanted to pull out my cards and play with them. I could just play the solitaire game, and it was a really lighthearted way to pull my decks out, look at the imagery, maybe get a little more familiar with what the cards look like. So that was kind of a cool reminder of that little connection. And then when we get into the pips, there's a section I highlighted here that I thought was really good. So I'm just going to read it in this video so you can enjoy it too, even if you don't have the book, which I encourage you to get. But here's what it says. No doubt the Trumps are important, but I like to think of them as the board of directors, CEOs, and the senior officers of a company. They're at the top of the chain, making decisions, proclaiming things, and occasionally getting involved in a scandal. They're setting the larger direction for the organization. The courts, meanwhile, are like the managers below them who directly supervise the worker bees, or, more diplomatically, the individual contributors, who are on the ground floor doing the work. The pips are those very workers, the ones in the field making the sales, engaging with customers, and doing the work of living. While the CEOs might be impressive, no company is anything without the frontline employees who are literally making the machine go. So I really, really liked that. Sorry if you can hear some traffic. That was a lot of traffic. My window's open because hormones, and I get hot, and then I get cold, and then I get hot again. So the window's open. You're going to hear some stuff. Anyways, so I really liked that description of the majors versus the courts versus the minors. It was a really cool way to kind of look at it. And the minors don't often get as much attention, and I love that we're starting with the minors because that's what I'm here for, is to learn the pips. I can really relate majors and courts to they're always going to be scenic in pretty much every deck, at least to a certain degree, so I really appreciate that that's where we're starting. Moving along, we're going to get into, after that, if you read this section, we got into numerology a little bit of an introduction to the reasoning, and then finally we move on to our activity, which, let's move my bookmark here. It's going to be to create our own meanings for the minors, numerological meanings, and so if you remember from this last week, our assignment was basically, the assignment I gave, because I'm the homework giver, was to read through page 36, which is that whole lesson 1, but only to do the following. Pick a deck to work with. Make sure you've got a copy of the book, obviously. Pick a deck to work with and create your table, so the structure for it, whether that was in a notebook or a spreadsheet or wherever you're going to keep it, and then pick your sources, which is what I'm most excited about for today's video, and I will share mine very shortly. I also wanted to share that I watched some people's pictures and videos who have worked on this book some, and they all had these notebooks like filled with handwritten notes, and that's what I was going to do. I'm like, I'm going to get a notebook, and I'm going to write all my notes by hand because that's neat. And then I was like, no man, because I type really fast, and I'm too lazy to write all that stuff down by hand. So I just kind of wanted to validate any of you who are like, just choosing your own way to do this. So whether it's writing it in a book, handwriting it, scrawling it on scratch paper, or like putting it on a spreadsheet, I'm with you, because whatever way works, it works. So mine is currently in Google Drive, in a Google spreadsheet, and it's all set up, and I've picked my sources, and now that's what we're really all here for, right? So I'm going to share mine. I'm actually really excited to hear from you all on what sources you have picked for this, because I think there's a lot of really interesting sources out there, and some are not going to be the usual suspects. So in Tom's book, he actually mentioned, I know I just put it away, but I got to pick it up again. He mentions that some of his sources were the book by Jodorowsky or Bendov. I don't have either of those, and I wasn't going to buy them just to have sources. I was like, that's not the point of this exercise. The point of this exercise is to come up with my own definitions, so any sources count. So I went digging into my book collection. Some of these will probably not surprise you, and some of these may, but I'm just going to work from the top of my pile to the bottom, and it's a pile. It's a pile. So first off, I was recently working with the Star Tarot by Kathy McClelland, which you might have noticed from my decks I worked with videos. So this was not last week's deck, but I believe the week before that. And I discovered in working with this book that the book is arranged numerologically. So I was like, hey, there might be some really cool numerology bits in here. And sure enough, there is. So at the beginning of every number, there's a whole page sort of devoted to what that number, the sort of the energy of that number. So for example, here I've got it on the 4s, and you can see I've got an entire page on the meaning of 4 in the tarot. So I actually think, and there's like even a little title, so this one says Holding Space as sort of the subtitle. I haven't dug into this yet because that wasn't this week's work and I'm trying to pace myself, but I can tell that there's some stuff to dig into, and I'm really excited actually to sort of read these meanings for the numbers and put those into my spreadsheet. So I'm excited about that. I do think that she's probably got a bit of a astrological slant here, but I'm not sure. So this is one of my sources. Another one of my sources, which will not surprise anybody at all, is Kitchen Table Tarot by Melissa Sonova. Now, she has at the beginning of each, she also has this book organized by the numbers, so it works, you know, from aces through to the kings, and for each minor suit. And at the beginning of each grouping of numbers, she has a much smaller little bit. So here's the 7. You can see she's got a little bit here on what the 7s mean. So I think I've been staring at my preview image again, but we'll get used to this. We'll work it out together. Anyway, I'm excited to use that this bit in the Kitchen Table Tarot and use this as another one of my sources. The next source is 78 Degrees of Wisdom, and surprisingly, there was not as much of a meaty section in here, but there is a section. So it's very, very short, but it's going to be included in my sources because I do love Rachel Pollack's work. On page 158 of my copy of 78 Degrees of Wisdom, and I believe mine is the 1997? No, that can't be right. Mine's the 2007 edition, so I don't know if the page numbers will be different, but on mine on page 158, there's a very short little synopsis of the numerological, some keywords for the numerology in the tarot, so I'm going to use that as one of my sources. The next one I dug into to find some good stuff was my guidebook for the Legacy of the Divine Tarot by Ciro Marchetti, and this is called Gateway to the Divine Tarot. And in here, by the way, what's neat about this guidebook, if you don't own the Legacy of the Divine or this guidebook, what's really cool is that for the meanings of all of the cards, there are multiple authors' interpretations. So what Ciro Marchetti has done is he's collaborated with other authors, like other tarot peoples, to get their input. So when you're reading in any card to read the definition, I want to make sure I don't lose my, oh no, I've got my section marked. Do I have it? Yeah, I have my section marked. So in any definition for any of the cards, you have literally a bit here that Ciro Marchetti has written, and then there's all these other authors. So the other authors involved are Ruth Ann and Wald Amberstone, James Rickcliffe, and Lisa Raffalo. So what's cool is that you get maybe not entirely agreeing viewpoints for the meaning of every single card in this entire deck, which is really cool. This was actually the first deck that had more of a Rider-Waite clone feel to it that I ever worked with after the Osho Zen for so many years. So anyway, in the appendix, I found a really cool section that had some, so there's a bunch of different correspondences, so there's some astrological correspondences, but there is some number correspondences. So on my copy of the book, it's page 290, and yeah, that's what I'm showing you. That's this whole page here. So it goes from 1 to 10. So this is one of my sources. So that was an exciting find. I also have the book Tarot and Astrology by Corinne Kenner. And in here, she has a pretty meaty, now this actually looks like it's Kabbalah-based numerology. 2 full pages on ace through 10. And it does look like it's specifically the Kabbalah. It's both. It looks like she's got it here lined up with the cards, the astrological associations, the spheres or the Sephiroth from the Kabbalah, from the world tree of life. I'm not very good with the Kabbalah, but that's what it looks like it is. and then sort of some keywords and description. But this does feel like it's very numerology based, so I'm going to be using that as one of my sources. And finally, nobody will be surprised to see my hefty Annabelle Wen's book, Holistic Tarot. I was not surprised to see in her appendices, does anybody know the plural of appendix? I don't. She has her Appendix F, which in this book is on page 783, so it starts on this page. Numerological associations, and that goes into general numerology, numerology in the suits, Pythagorean numerology. I mean, nobody's surprised that Annabelle has all of this in here. We're not surprised, are we? No, we're not. We're definitely not. And so that's all of Appendix F, and it looks like also possibly bleeding into Appendix G. Oh yeah, so the Pythagorean numerology looks like it's Appendix G. So I'm going to be digging into that section in Holistic Tarot too. Whew. So that is my pile of books. So just to give you an idea, this is what my pile looks like. And because I find it difficult to stop when I'm collecting sources, I also have made a note of 2 websites I'm going to use for comparison. At least I'm telling myself I'm going to use. By the time I'm done with these, I might change my mind. But right now, I have a page, Tarot and Numerology, on biddytarot.com, so I'll put that link down below. And also I found a website that looked like it was looking at, I want to say Hebrew numerology. The website was Grace in Torah, and I will put the link for that below as well, but it looked like it might have a slightly different take also. And one of the things that Tom says in his book is that we should look for sources that are from a variety of places. So between the sources I have in my pile of books and those 2 websites, I feel like I'll get a pretty diverse array of keywords. So that brings us to what we're doing this upcoming week. So before my next video on Thursday, my goal for myself is to go through in that first lesson 1.1, to go through steps 5 through 11, which includes taking a break. We'll see if I get to the break part. But 5 through 11 is basically all about taking your sources and putting in the highlights for what those, like sort of your summarized version of what those sources say for keywords for the different numbers 1 through 10. And once that's all finished, the idea is that you will, yes, we'll see how we do. We'll touch base next Thursday and see if this was too much for 1 week. But the idea is to get all of those sources sort of noted into your spreadsheet or your table in your notebook or however you're going to keep track of it, and then kind of compare them and come up with your own distilled, like where do you agree, where do you disagree, what keywords stand out across all of those sources, and come up with your own sort of distillation is what he's calling it. So a short definition for yourself for what that number is going to mean to you. And that's what we're going to try to do for the 10 numbers this upcoming week. We're not going to take it any further. There's a couple more steps here. So we're going to stop there. So the idea is pretty much just to get the information into the spreadsheet, look it over, see if you can come up with some temporary, I'm going to stress this, temporary distilled meanings for yourself. So some temporary idea of how you would pull from those different sources and create your own meaning from those. And it can be like keywords that you've pulled from each source. It can be things that agree, things that disagree, but just get your starting point for your meaning, because the following week we're going to be looking at that a little deeper and solidifying it for ourselves. But for now, we just want to get our first sort of impression, our first idea of what those distilled meanings are going to be, and then we will revisit this next week, see how we did, and then go from there. So really important, if you're following along with me, I'm kind of figuring out the pace as I go. I've already changed it a couple of times as I start to work on things, and I think what feels like a reasonable amount to do in a week. But I'm not the only one on this journey, and I'm not even sure that's not going to be too much this coming week. So it's really important to me to get your feedback. If you're participating, you can participate by commenting down below and letting me know what sources did you choose this past week. You can let me know if you feel like that's going to be too much, or maybe as you get through maybe next week. You can let me know if that was too much or it was a good amount or it's too slow or too fast. I would love to get your feedback. You can either participate in the comments down below on this video, on every video as I post them, or you can join us in the Supportive Tarot Facebook group and we can chat about it there. Or you can join us also over in Tom Benjamin's Tarot on Earth study group, which if you have a physical copy of the book, you can join over there as well and share your sources, your challenges, the sticking points, the places where you're struggling with the rest of the group, and we can kind of bounce things off of each other. So whether it's here on my channel, whether it's in the Supportive Tarot Facebook group, whether it's in the Tom Benjamin's Tarot on Earth study group, wherever it might be, let's sort of share in this journey as we go along and have a good time with it together. So I'm really excited to start digging into all of these sources and making my notes, so I'm going to leave it here for now. But again, I hope to hear from you about how you're doing, how you're enjoying it, and I will see you all again very, very soon. Take care all. Bye-bye.